Back with Countdown right here on Bloomberg Quint. About 25 minutes left for the markets to shut shop. Just bring up what the world markets are doing as well in the session today, though I must say we've had our own gyrations, as not as much as the world market gyrations, but we're performing in line with what the world markets are doing. Europe, fair degree of green, and the Dow future should come up on your screen as well. I would reckon that there could be no big negative cues coming in. What's doing well? I think Titan companies inched up a little bit from the levels that it was trading at, so up about 2.5 or quarter to 3%. Asian Paints has a 3.5% uptick, so that too, actually that may not be trading at the highest point of the day, but still doing okay for itself. And Yes Bank up 6% at 175 is packing a strong punch. It's not about all up at the gainers though. There are losers. The likes of HPBP, IOC have corrected. And as we said at the start of the show, heavyweights including HDFC Bank, as well as Reliance Industries have cooled off. Reliance, though, I must say, is now trading very, very flat or maybe marginally in the green. It's been a sharp intraday recovery for Reliance Industries as well. 1093 from 2.5% lower to back in the green. That's a stellar move. Actually, coming on this one, it's been beaten down the last few days, was down about 4% yesterday as well. Amar, what do you do with the Reliance Industries?
Yeah, looking at Reliance, what we see is that Reliance has got very strong support coming at around 1040, 1050 levels. And technically, if you look at Reliance, Reliance continues to be extremely strong on the long-term charts. But on the intermediate term trend, it is clearly showing that it is now in for some consolidation. And on the downside, it's 1000, and on the upside, again, I would say 1150. So this is a range. Now the stock is going to trade in the range. It could test the lower levels as well, but it would find it extremely difficult to rise above the 1150, 1160 mark. So it's in for consolidation.
All right, that's Reliance Industries. 1095 on the stock, about 0.5% lower, higher in the session this afternoon. Sachidan, anything over the last half an hour that's seemed interesting to you on the charts?
Well, Biocon is something that we've already discussed. I would like to stick to that particular outlook. In fact, the way it managed to breach above 630 zone, I think this is one particular counter that should do well going forward. The defensive play is much more evident in terms of pharma and IT, and I think as of now, when we are in this particular process of forming a bottom or a formidable base, probably these two sectors are looking good, and within this space, I think Biocon now looks very commendable. So I think I will stick to Biocon, and I think it's a very good opportunity wherein longs can be still added, and we are expecting that this particular target of the pattern, which is around 660, should be achieved soon.
All right, gentlemen, just stay on with us. Time to have a look at what dealing rooms are talking about this afternoon. It's going to be definitely interesting to see what comes out of there. Darshan and Yatin, both of them are here with us. Aside of election, what else is taking center stage, Yatin?
Well, Devina, some chit-chat with the dealing rooms does indicate that at this point in time, most of them are in a mood to really look at the mid-cap end of the market. Remember, since the morning, when the markets had a gap down, mid-caps were outperforming, and dealers expect for the next few days at least, there could be some outperformance on the mid-cap side. So, they have been, of the view that mid-caps are, most likely to outperform the large caps in the short term. And more importantly, they have initiated some short trading positions, small trading positions in the mid-cap end of the market. So let's see how really does, the mid-cap end of the market, shapes up. Apart from that, you have the entire banking space, especially some private banks as well as, public sector banks, wherein dealers do indicate that SBI as well as some private banks could be interesting trade. However, given the market volatility, the political outcome, two sectors to stay away from, according to dealing rooms, is the infrastructure pack as well as the metal pack. Both of these, because of the global news flow as well as the domestic news flow, are bound to remain, volatile. So metals as well as infra is something that they're avoiding However, they are bullish on some mid-caps, private banks, as well as SBI in particular. But Darshan has some stock-specific things to talk.
Basically, I think overall on the Nifty, the trend seems to be moving on the positive side now. Most of the negatives that have come out are already priced in, and they're pretty much happy that with the performance of the BJP in states where they were facing anti-incumbency. Sun Pharma is one of the stocks that's buzzing on a buyback buzz that a couple of dealing rooms did indicate. There's no formal communication by the company, but nevertheless the Nifty Pharma index has been moving up, led by Sun Pharma. Probably the buyback news could come in. Counters like Strides are also moving. Traction is returning to financials, especially Yes Bank, one of the top gainers as far as the banking space is concerned. And Sun TV and United Spirits are seeing a lot of selling. Sun TV pretty much at a 52-week low. Traction continues on the negative side for the counter.
Thanks a lot for that, Darshan. So that's the view from what dealing rooms are recommending in the session today. But strong moves for the markets. As we scan, just make sure that we bring to you the election updates off and on as we stand. As I look at the website, Bloomberg Quint website, Madhya Pradesh is split down the middle with the BJP a slender majority, 111 to 109. Rajasthan 74 to 100, BJP Congress, as well as Chhattisgarh. A known fact anyway, which is 19 to 64. So the two are done. Madhya Pradesh still right down the middle, and let's wait and watch what happens there. As of now, it's split right down the middle. Chakri Lokapriya of TCG Asset Management with us in the studio now, understands a bit of politics and the market's impact that this could have to. Chakri, the simple question though, was it excessive pessimism ahead of the event which caused this up move? Because frankly, the market was heavily short, and there's been a bit of a short covering led move today. And part two of my question is, can that last?
Indeed, I think it can last, and because right now, going into 2019 May, I think the field is wide open. You had Madhya Pradesh, which was a state, huge anti-incumbency, long time, but BJP has just put up a good show there. And the other states are kind of going in line with what the market was expecting or how the performance would be. So that's not been a negative surprise, which in a sense is a positive. And given that the market was short, and coupled with that, you also had the RBI governor's resignation yesterday, which also has helped the move today upwards.
No, sorry, can you repeat that?
Urjit Patel's resignation yesterday is in a way kind of positive for the banking sector, because it now goes back to the February 12th circular, where they opens it up for debate about whoever the new RBI governor is going to be, and whether it's going to ease lending norms for both NBFCs as well as banks, both PCA banks as well as non-PCA banks.
Rajneesh Kumar did make that point as well, that he would be surprised if it comes up in the same shape and form.
But won't that be read a little bit negatively, according to you, if things were tweaked around and changed around too much, as giving an impression that there is the government at play there?
See, there are two sides to the coin. On one side, there's this line of thought whether there is a government interference. On the other hand, there has been a certain amount of going slow on the reform pace as far as the banks were concerned. In terms of, one couldn't take a shotgun approach and put hard deadlines for NPAs which are long dated. If it's a power sector reform, it takes, these are 30-year loans, 20-year loans, and you can't have a cutoff date saying that after this you go into an NPA, because in many cases they have turned NPAs because of either lack of PPAs or lack of raw material, forces which are beyond a company's control. So from that perspective, it kind of brings that the NPAs will go down as a result, or rather, if there's a restructuring, some of those assets which were going to be classified as NPAs won't be so, and which is a good thing because it reduces the strain on the banking system.
Right. So lay it out for us now. I mean, chart the course for us in the next few months to come.
I think what the market is telling us is, the market, the views is wide open in the sense that clearly what the market is looking for is a decisive mandate. And a decisive mandate is good for the markets. Rather, so if you have either the UPA or the NDA, which shows that it can form one of the lead coalition partner And then that removes a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace.
Well, as we speak, one place in where the uncertainty seems to have come off is Yes Bank. That stock is up 7.5, 178 and counting. And frankly, this has to be in reaction to the resignation yesterday as opposed to any other thing, Chakri. 7.5% higher. SBI is up about 2.5% too, and I think people would be rejoicing. There's PSU Bank names, I think, the belief. And again, as I said, the SBI chairman saying that he finds it difficult to see if the Feb 12 circular can go ahead in the current shape and form. Would you be a buyer in some of the troubled banks?
Some of the troubled banks, yes, simply because, and also the NBFCs for that matter, given that their valuations are dramatically, are very cheap. I mean, whether it's a Union Bank or a Canara Bank, or even they're trading at less than half a time's book. Or if you look at SBI, or the leader in the banking space, is trading only at about 0.9 times book. They're doing a fundraising of 20,000 crores, which is coming up fairly soon. And all this is good news for the overall lending. And that is, in fact, the reason why consumer also was likely to do well, because forget about big ticket items. The small ticket items, if you want to go out and buy a refrigerator, NBFC's tightness has slowed down that bit of it. So if that liquidity comes back, then the consumer also picks up.
Most of the NBFC names also in today's session have seen some bit of pullback and are doing well in this session. Do you see this as a silver lining for most of them as well, and the tightness getting eased a bit?
Yes, I think yes, the answer is yes, and it's been because of two reasons. One is whether you take Kotak Bank, Yes Bank, ICICI, Axis, all these companies have had change in leadership. And change in leadership usually translates into a slowdown of lending, because the new person who comes on board takes his or her own time to again restart lending. And largely all these moves were because of RBI's views on each one of the situations. Now that situation is now completely going to be different depending on who's the new person going to come in, and it's likely that the dispensation hopefully is far more conducive, because in all these cases lending would have come down. Well-run banks like a Kotak, when the stake sale of the promoter was an issue, or rather still is an issue, and at that time no new branch openings. At that point, and that means lower lending. Yeah. Now if that happens, then it translates into higher lending.
So just put into perspective, Kotak Mahindra Bank and yesterday's right petition that was filed against the RBI, and what that does now for the stock. I mean, leaving aside the murmur of Berkshire Hathaway buying into the bank, but just the fact that they've gone ahead and done this.
Yes, now if they go ahead and do it, they would be complying with the letter of the law. And it brings down the stake to
How much time does it give them? What kind of a window do you see for Kotak?
The original window was end of this month.
Yeah.
And that was a huge overhang, because that's a big chunk from going down from 30 to 20. Now if they go ahead with this existing norms, converting the preferreds, then in that case it's a huge positive for the bank.
Which other pockets are you closely watching, Chakri, right now? And,
I think in these kind of environments, it's fairly easy to keep it simple. Like, I mean, in terms of, I look at lending as the biggest thing, whether it's by an NBFC or a corporate bank or a retail bank, because in all these cases, if they lend more, whether it's to a consumer or to corporate or to an infra project, it eases the end sectors, and therefore it then lifts all boats. So from that perspective, I would focus on banks and some of the beaten down consumer names where there is an easy turn. If you look at infra names, it will take a longer time to turn because they're long dated projects, whereas consumer, once liquidity comes in, yields go down, it's easier for me to then prepone the purchase of, well, let's say, a washing machine that I wanted to do, which I postponed.
What happens to the overall, spending by the government now? There were talks of that picking up, which would, in a way, lend some support to the infrastructure space.
I think still, the number of projects that are being announced are fairly robust. Now it comes all down to the wire, because we still have only about 4 or 5 months left. Now, against this backdrop, now it's whether the execution can pick up. execution traditionally, if you look back in the past, has always picked up in the road sector, and versus, let's say, other infra projects. Even power is an infra project for that matter. So I think if we see some amount of easing in road pickup, road construction, which I think is still unlikely, but I think infra as a space valuations are okay. And from that perspective, I'd stick there to the larger names like L&T or some of the companies which are really down, valuations are really attractive.
Okay, just stay on with us, Chakri. We've got 10 minutes left to go for market closing, and the apt time to get in some closing strategies for tomorrow's session. So both our technical experts here with us, Amar Singh as well as Sachidanand Tekar. I'll come to you first, Amar, for your closing idea.
I would say that one can look at Marico. Technically, it's strong on the charts, and also we've seen a sharp pullback today. And it has moved from the oversold territory, so it does have some resistance on the higher side, but I would say that any pullback towards 352, 354 levels, that can be used to initiate a long position with a stop loss of 341 and a target of 380 on the upside.
What about you, Sachidanand?
Yes Bank really looks interesting. In fact, the stock has been under pressure, but if you look at the overall formation on the broader structure, it has been forming a falling wedge formation. If you look at the daily RSI, we have seen a breach of its previous swing high, and the price pattern is now confirming it. So I think 174 should be the stop loss for the trade, and we may see a move extended right out to 190 to 193. So the reward to risk is also sweet. Longs can be added in Yes Bank.
A clutch of high beta names have moved up in the last 15-20 minutes. Reliance Communication should come up on your screen. Tiny tune, but is doing that. Adani Enterprises, though, is up about just 7.5%, and again has moved up in the last few minutes. Quest Corp is up 13%, and again a bit of a bump up in the last few minutes of trade. Minda Corp, a bit of a bump up in the last few minutes of trade. So some movers and shakers out there in the last 15 minutes of the session. A quick thought here, Amar Singh, Adani Enterprises or maybe a Quest Corp?
Yeah, looking at Quest Corp, what we are seeing is that the stock has definitely bounced back, and it has been a sharp recovery. And it seems that it has formed a bottom. And technically, it was, if you look at the charts across different time frames, on the long term as well as the intermediate and the short term, it was in oversold territory. So I would say that yes, it seems that the stock has formed a bottom, and the stock on the upside could rally immediately towards 720 odd levels, because that's a level of resistance. So if that is taken out, then the stock can trade higher towards the 800 mark. But the way the stock is closing today, if it holds the lows of the day, then yes, we could say that the stock has formed a bottom.
Okay, so do watch out for some of those names as well. The financials notwithstanding, Chakri, that the consumer names, to select few, have bounced back today. Asian Paints, Titan, case in point, but a few others. Colgate, I think, is up about 4 or 5%. Some of the others too have moved up. Why this behavior?
I know it's a combination of both global and local factors in the case of these names, because on one hand you have oil which is coming off, which is a kind of an input, whether it's to the paint companies, to the tire companies, or even for Hindustan Lever, Colgates of the world. Palm oil is a derivative of things. So that's one. Second is hopefully there will be increased liquidity because of yesterday's going into banks. And the third is, of course, the election had built up. In leading up to the election, there was a lot of short position unwinding as well that I think you'll witness in the coming days.
So once that is done, Chakri, what do you reckon happens? Because global factors will take center stage, I presume. We are not exactly cheap in valuations. Would you, and if indeed, the Reserve Bank governor appointment is not of, is a bit of a yes man scenario to the powers to be, will the markets or do the markets have the probability of correcting from where they are right now, or do you believe a large portion of the damage is done?
The large portion of the damage was done in the past, and also if you look into the future, Now it looks like, the extra supply of oil is likely to keep, and the glut is unlikely to go away anytime in the next couple of months. So that means it keeps oil prices on the lid, keeps inflation on the lid as far as India is concerned. Therefore, lowering the original RBI stance of having a calibrated approach. Now potentially they can even move to a neutral approach as it relates to their rate outlook. So that is one big positive. And second is in an environment where inflation is largely in control and growth was anyway kind of anemic because your GDP forecasts were cut going into this quarter. Now if that inflation, or rather lack of inflation, will add, and plus the new liquidity which is anticipated by the market will come into, if they ease out some of the lending norms, continue to provide sufficient liquidity to the NBFCs in the form of OMOs, then overall what that does is, because lowers yields, lowers cost of financing, and lower cost of financing translates into higher earnings. But don't get me wrong, this quarter when they report, the numbers are likely to be bad. I think the market is looking beyond that, because if this trend in global factors continue, that will be a significant, provide a support to the stock prices, because they're not expensive from the traditional sense of the word, because historically they're still in their 5-year, 6-year ranges.
All right, got that, Chakri. Thanks a lot for joining us. Appreciate you taking out the time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chakri.
All right, back to the markets then. We just got 5 minutes left to go for market closing. Get in some quick chart checks from our technical experts. And while we were talking about some of the defensive names, a stock like Bata, does do well in the last 2 trading sessions. Today as well, the stock's up a good 6% That's the highest point of the day, and the volumes have picked up 1.3 million shares on Bata, 1,075 on the counter. Amar, are you tracking a Bata?
Yeah, looking at Bata, if you look at it technically, it's extremely strong on the long-term charts. And that's the reason we are seeing that the stock has bounced back. And if you look at it technically, I would say in somewhere in August, it had made a high of 1115. So effectively, there is a possibility that it could retest those highs. And currently, it's around 1075. Today has been an extremely sharp day. And also it has got very strong support coming in around 1020 odd levels. So any pullback can be used as a buying opportunity, but one needs to remember that 1100 and 1120, that's going to act as a crucial resistance zone for Bata. Till the time that is not taken out, we could witness profit booking around those levels.
Sachidanand, what about somebody who's got a long call on a Yes Bank? Should he carry home the long position?
Well, absolutely yes. What we are seeing here is that the broader structure is now getting aligned, and we may see a reversal soon in this particular counter. If you look at the RSI itself, we have a 3-point divergence since this particular pattern on the price scale started evolving since September 2018. And right now, if you look at the immediate movement of the RSI, we are seeing a swing break on the RSI, which is a compelling reason for me to say that the momentum which we have seen today should get carried forward. So I think 174 should be a stop loss for the trade, and 192, 196, these are the levels that we are watching on Yes Bank.
Okay, gentlemen, stay on. Let's start wrapping up the markets for our viewers, and it's been a very interesting day of trade, and I'm a bit of a speechless mood because nobody quite anticipated this reaction, to be honest, today, or most people didn't. Let's be honest about it. 0.5% higher for the Sensex and the Nifty, about 0.4 for the Nifty Bank. The mid caps and the small caps have done even better for themselves. So a strong show, 2% higher for the small cap space, about 1.7% for the mid cap space as well. But let me talk about the large caps first, and let's see what's moving and what's not. So Yes Bank up about 8% at the highest point of the day. Strong gains for Sun Pharma, 6% higher. Kotak Bank about 3%. Asian Paints about 4%. Asian Paints and Titan, bringing up the mood in the consumption space. Ultratech Cement has bounced back. Bajaj Finserv about 2.5% higher. So good moves out there. Not all hunky-dory. OMCs have corrected. HDFC Bank has corrected about 1.5%, a percent and a third. ICICI Bank about 1% too. Maruti Suzuki marginally lower in trade. Hero MotoCorp marginally lower in trade. But those disappointments were few. This is a stark reversal that we saw midway through the day today. But if large caps were impressive, mid caps actually put in even better foot forward. What stood out, Devina?
Well, the fact that they actually put up a good show of about 2.5% talks about the strength that's there in the broader market, and it was a good broad-based move that came in. If you take a look at the advanced decline ratio, which will come up on the screen behind just some time, it'll tell you the kind of moves that we've seen. But on the index, a good 1.75% move. On the mid caps, the small caps doing equally well by another 2%. Let's take a look at individual stocks. And Adani Enterprise shot up about 8% in intraday trade, and that was the highest point of the day on the stock. Other stocks in the mid cap IT pocket, IT as a space did really well. So the Nifty IT index itself in intraday trade reached the day's high. So you've got an NIT Tech up about 5% and Hexaware that's doing well too. Aside from that, a few other names that did well included the likes of Quest Corp, 11.8% higher at 676. You had a Zensar Technologies again from the IT pocket, the mid-cap IT space, 6% towards the end of trade. Suven Life Sciences, a smaller name within the pharma pack, 232 on the stock that is doing well in the session. Strides Arcolab again within that pocket, 6.5% higher. So it was more broad-based this time around. Let's quickly look at some of the losers as well that didn't put up a great show. These were some of the gainers. The paints, you had the consumer names that did well. Stocks that didn't do well included the likes of a Sun TV, marginally lower, but the quantum of losses that have come in are slightly under 1.5%. So not much in terms of big cuts out there within the system. More gains than losses. You had Petronet LNG that lost out in the session, and an HCC that remained flattish. But really, a seesaw of sorts in today's session, Neeraj. I mean, taking a look at how the index opened to how we traded on the back of the election numbers when they started to come in, to a final close of about 0.5% higher on the index, and the broader markets putting up an exceptional show.
Yeah, I think surprise one and all. Let's just bring up the statistics and see what's moved and what's not. So the market breadth, needless to say, will be looking okay. So in the green, about 3:1 in favor of the advances. This shouldn't surprise anybody looking at just the core numbers of the mid-cap and the small-cap indices.
Let's take a look at the contributors, and more importantly, after this we'll talk about the turnover and how it's shaped up on a day like this. So while we had losses coming in from the heavyweights like HDFC and some of the other names like Maruti Suzuki lost up, but that was marginal losses coming there. The big gains that came in from a Kotak Mahindra Bank, 14 odd points, ITC, SBI, Sun Pharma adding weight to the Nifty.
Yep, bring up the volumes and see what's happening. Well, actually a pickup in the cash volumes too, but the F&O volumes stock move. I mean, fairly higher compared to what it usually does.
That would obviously be the case also because of how the system was any which ways heavily inundated with the shorts that came in. Today's session saw some amount of unwinding, and whether or not it translates into some amount of longs to be carried forward, we'll have to wait and watch when the bar copy comes out in the evening. But on the cash side also, it looked fairly encouraging, about 33,500 odd crores.
Yep. Looking okay. Final thoughts from our experts. What does this indicate for the near term? Amar, that's the question really. Do you reckon that we can carry on the momentum tomorrow?
I would say that the way the markets have reacted today clearly shows that there is definitely some buying interest which has come into the market. But we'll have to watch out for the follow through because as I said, 10,650, 10,700 is a crucial zone of resistance. And technically also, if you look at the charts from a short-term perspective, the market was in oversold territory, so there was this bounce back which happened. But it will definitely meet with resistance at higher levels, and the stock and the indices could go in for some consolidation. Nifty, immediately, as I said, short-term support 10,300, on the upside 10,700. So that's the range that I'm seeing. A breach on the either side can only reconfirm whether the markets is going up or we could see some sell-off happening.
All right, what about you, Sachidanand?
Well, from a structure perspective, I think 10,440 has been very critical, especially on the weekly scale. And we have seen a swing below it, and the way we have closed, far away from it, I think that's a very commendable thing. The next level that we are watching out is around 10,650. In case if we see a follow-through move towards 10,650 soon, then probably we are in for a move towards 10,900. So I think so far so good. probably a move for tomorrow's session will be very important. In case if we sustain above these levels, then definitely the momentum should get carried forward throughout this particular expiry.
Got that. We leave it at that, gentlemen. Thanks very much for taking out the time this afternoon, Amar, as well as Sajid Anand.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Countdown. Thanks a lot for watching. From Neeraj, myself, and the entire team that's put this show together.